arrogance there. You know, look at the arrogance, you know, not utilizing techniques or that were being used in other parts of the world. How arrogant. So, and I'm just going to ask, I hear some background noise, so if you could just be so kind as to put yourself on mute, appreciate that for all of us. Okay. And so there are many women who are physicians who practice in Syria, Spain, Iraq, Egypt, and Turkey. Some examples of Zainab from the Bani Awad tribe. She treated eye conditions as well as performed surgery. Was assisted by the name of Farida al-Kubra. During Umayyad time, the Caliphate time, there was Karaka al-Amira, Salama al-Kis, Hubaba. During the Abbasid Caliphate time, Motayam al-Hamishiyya, Mabuba, and Asiya, who was a midwife. And I just want to say here, you know, as I mentioned early on, that, you know, I was very excited about having the opportunity to talk about this, but also I was very disappointed because actually a lot of the information I got for this presentation came from a journal that was published, I think it's called the British Journal on Islamic Medicine. And it was just published last year, 2021. And the authors, who are both physicians, I mean, they unabashedly said, you know, there was not much documented. And like I said, at the beginning of this, we know that women have been involved in the science of medicine since the beginning of time. And it's so unfortunate we don't have the wealth of documentation about their contributions as we have about men. Now, you know me well enough that I'm always going to make a social comment about that. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about Muslim women and modern day medical professions. I say unsung and undocumented. So, you know, we know of our dear sister, of Dr. Aslam Teresi, who was one of the co-founders of the biotech, which was ahead of the curve in developing the mRNA such that it could be used as a COVID vaccine. And to the left is her husband, Dr. Bouguer Sahin, and they're both from Muslims who are from Morocco. So now let's just talk about women in general in the healthcare professions. And I apologize again, because I did try to find out if there were some books or texts or articles out there that really tell us, well, where are Muslim women as far as in healthcare profession? But we're everywhere. You know, I just want to give you the breadth of our impact in this great profession. Some 60% of new entrants into health in the healthcare profession are women. 76% of all healthcare jobs in the US are held by women. There are some, and this is from 2019 statistics, 763,000 full-time physicians and surgeons in the US. And there at that time were about 264,002, or about a third of those physicians and surgeons who are women. And like I said, there was no data that I could find. I did try to reach out to a Muslim Women's Association in Dallas, Texas, but time got away. I did not have a chance to, follow up to see if they could provide us any more information. So what are some of the other professions? Well, women dominate in the nursing profession. There are probably over 2.4 million, and this is pre-COVID, nurses, registered nurses in the US, 1.2 million psychiatric and home healthcare aides. And this is based on US citizens. And these two represent about 85% of all healthcare workers. So imagine, what this profession would look like without women. I know when I was in training, as they say, back when the dinosaurs were roaming, we always depended upon the nurses, the vast majority of the women. And they kept on top of things, because it's one thing for you to say and be a researcher and come up with some fantastic or wonderful drug or technique, but it's another thing. Who is it that is going to help to administer these things and also take care of the patient in so many other ways that are part of that whole healing process? So we are in many professions. course, we talked about physicians, including surgeons, medical researchers, nurse practitioners, physician assistants. Again, the nurse practitioners and physician assistants, they are largely women, and particularly in the U.S. Registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, medical assistants, nursing assistants, physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, radiology technicians, laboratory technicians, home healthcare workers and homemakers, health educators. And how important is that? Even though they're not prescribing drugs, well, in a sense they are, because they're prescribing to the patient lifestyles or the types of, and with the nutritionists, the kind of foods that we should be eating. This is all part of healthcare. Social workers, case managers, community health workers. And this is something that the Taleem Community Wellness Center is really interested in helping to cultivate groups of individuals in the community who have connections with community members and help them with their health challenges, be it, helping them to find the right medical provider, signing them up with what we call entitlement services, the things about, getting them enrolled, I should say, in their entitlements, like the insurances, public aid, and the like. And now, of course, we cannot forget about our sisters and brothers who are providing what we call the complementary health. And Taleem Community Wellness Center, we intentionally put together an integrative model because we knew that in order for us to really provide adequate holistic care, we had to bring both the Western and the non-Western together. So we have, professions like naturopaths, naturopaths, traditional Chinese medicine doctors. Shout out to Dr. Bashir, acupuncturist. Shout out again to Dr. Bashir. Massage therapists, yoga practitioners, Reiki masters, sound therapists, herbalists, and the list goes on. So there are many women who are doing great work in medicine. And, they are actually at the point now we're beginning to capture the outcomes of these therapies. And this is becoming reported out in medical journals. And many major institutions are incorporating this, so it's very important to understand this, that, the complementary medicine has, is having its day now, alhamdulillah, especially when COVID hit. We saw that there was a lot of emphasis on self-care, and many of these non-Western modalities were at the forefront in helping people to learn how to take care of themselves. So, as I mentioned before or implied, medicine has marginalized women, and it became marginalized when when physicians became a profession, okay? By that I mean, when it became something that people could make money off of, and it gave them a higher status in society, then we saw that separation. It created this hierarchy that still exists until today. Male physicians or male practitioners, even researchers, tend to hold higher ranking positions in science. They dominate highly compensated medical specialties and typically gain higher status and recognition than women in this field. Although women make up the largest number of healthcare workers, their value is often underrated. Medicine is not limited to those who diagnose and treat. Treatment and healing go far beyond research and development. Women provide most of the long-term treatment and care. In conclusion, women in general and Muslim women in particular have and continue to play a major role in the science of medicine. There need to be more programs provided for girls and women that focus on preparing them for all types of medical professions. There should be more scholarship and research conducted to honor the work and achievements of women in medicine, including those of Muslim women. This noble profession must recognize and provide fair compensation for women in the healthcare arena. A strong healthcare system needs many types of players, and women are essential to making that happen. May Allah bless us all. I pray Allah that nothing I've said has been incorrect, and if so, I take it on myself. I'm thankful to Allah for this opportunity to have spoken to you, and I'm going to turn it back over to our esteemed host, Dr. Gloria Bashir. Assalamu alaikum.
Wow. Amazing, Dr. Constance Shabazz. That was an amazing presentation. I am particularly taken with your research about Muslim women going, as far back as during the days of Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him. And your comments about the marginalization of women and the things that you're really putting forth in terms of how to, how to positively, right, diminish those actions. So let me just ask you a little bit further. As a business owner, as a CEO, as a physician, what other things might you recommend that would help to offset this marginalization of women? Because given this Women's History Month and our celebration, I so appreciate your words and how to, lift women up in the medical field. So what are some other ideas that you would suggest?
Oh, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is mentoring. Okay. We need to make sure that our young women, our girls are seeing us in that space and encouraging them, because by the time a lot of young people get to the 8th grade and graduating, from the school system, you're graduating 8th grade or 9th grade, they have already had a track record of dealing with the sciences and the math. And I'm going to be honest about it. A lot of our schools do an abysmal job, and they actually scare them away from that. So we need to step in and, work with them and let them know that, just because maybe you're having challenges with math and science, there's room for you, in this profession. And we need to support them. Like I said, seeing those role models. And that's really what got me started. When I graduated from high school, I was very, very interested in the sciences. I thought I was going to go into biomedical research. And I had the opportunity, very fortuitous and nothing's fortuitous in this life, to see a story about 2 African-American female physicians in New York City. Now, mind you, I was in Chicago at the time. But I saw a story about them, and these 2 women started a sickle cell foundation in New York because they were both pediatricians, and they were seeing so many of their young patients dying from sickle cell. So I decided, I said, you know what, I'm packing up my bags. I'm going to go work for these people. And let me tell you, that was one of the most transformative moments in my life, going to work for these 2 Black women who, believe it or not, both of them had gone to Yale, which was at that time not only, almost totally male dominant. They had certainly had very few Black people there, but they were like the only women or Black women in their classes. So that, seeing them and seeing the odds that they were against, and still seeing them to come out, go into practice, and they could have made money or whatever money looked like in that day and time, but they chose to take on a challenge where the rest of society had not, because sickle cell was kind of like the way HIV/AIDS we were treated with that, with COVID, you name it, the checklist of all the disparities we have because of unaddressed and underaddressed things. So I saw the power of that in my life, and it was because of the opportunity I had to work with them, the opportunity to go out and I did a lot of community work. I did testing and things. That's really what really motivated me, alhamdulillah, to become a physician. That took about 4 or 5 more years afterwards, but the seed was there, and I so appreciate what those 2 women did, even though they didn't realize. So I try to do the same thing myself, when I'm around, young women, trying to encourage them, that you can do it, don't give up, if you need help, there's help out there for you. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but that's the approach that I like to take.
I appreciate that you actually gave me a twofer, because my follow-up question was your personal journey into medicine, which certainly you've just touched on. If there's anything additional that you'd like to add, because I really support and agree with your position on mentorship, uh, and you know, and being able to follow in the paths of those two women who were working themselves. So, anything to add about your own personal journey?
You know, by the time I finished undergrad, you know, you know, there's this thing about women and our professions and age and little stuff like that. Okay, like so I remember getting pushback from someone who I dearly loved that was actually influenced me in many ways in terms of my education. You know, say, oh, you're too old. And it was so funny because I had already gotten accepted to school. You know, that was one thing. And another thing, you know, I'm one of these type of people, you tell me no, that means yes. Okay. And so I remember my first day in residency, my youngest son was less than 5 months old. Okay. And I remember people, you know, telling people I have, you know, I've got, you know, a young child, this, that, and the other. And them saying to me, oh, who's taking care of your baby? Now I know good and well that they would, you know. So I told him, I said, well, you know, last I knew, this child had a father. And you know, he does a very good job. And you all knew my husband, okay. And I said, you know, the only thing I haven't been able to teach him how to do is breastfeed, but we're working on that.
I love it. Thank you so much for that. You know, the history that you've given today is very open.
Sharing screen.
And I'd like to open it up to the floor. If we have viewers who'd like to ask some questions, please raise your virtual hand. And but I do have, okay, we have a question from Frederick Aldine. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, it's not really perfectly sound. I just wanted to elaborate on the racial issues that you face in medical school. I think that is important because as women, we get a double whammy.
I so agree. I was one of 6 students in a class of 76. Okay. And, you know, from day one, we were bombarded all the time with, you know, some level of racial, and around the time of the Bakke decision, where it was the reverse discrimination suit that was filed by this white male out in California, saying that, you know, that he was discriminated against, that Black people, brown people were not as competent as him, and they were allowed into school. So we came in with that kind of animus. We had times where, like, we had something called a call room, where you would round, you know, you would be on call at night, and they had these little rooms for us to sleep in when we had a chance to. And there were actually, you know, epitaphs and things on the walls in this room, you know, writing very disparaging things, you know, using the N-word, even that we had maybe 1 or 2 African-American attending physicians that were connected with the medical school, and just writing negative things. We actually had the dean of the School of Medicine sit a bunch of us down one day and said the only reason that we were at the medical school is because of affirmative action, and that we were inferior educationally than the other students there, who at that time were largely Caucasian. Okay. And so we put up with that, but I'm gonna tell you a story. We got them back, okay, because I was a member of the Student National Medical Association, which is it's a Black student organization nationwide. And so we had an event on the campus. So we invited Black campuses and medical schools to come. And so we decided that we were going to have as our speaker Dr. Naeem Akbar. And so the dean and his wife came to the presentation. Dr. Akbar gave this fantastic speech talking about the origins of medicine and, being based in Africa, whatever. And at the end of this, that the dean, he was visibly, beat red. Okay. Well, it was so funny because like I said, the dean's wife was there. And somehow she had a whole different impression. She was running up to Dr. Akbar, afterwards, all up in his face, it's like she was just like enamored with him. And here's her husband was so nervous, was standing. That man wanted to get out of the room so fast. If a train had come through there, he would have hooked on to that. But we felt like we were, vindicated, from the way that he talked to us, And the interesting thing is those very students went on to achieve well in their respective residency programs. Many of them became what we call chief residents. That means you're the top resident, okay? They went to some of the best institutions, and we said, Steve, we showed you. You showed you. So it still exists, in these schools. But I'm gonna tell you one thing, Dr. Amina. One of the things that's really keeping having more, I want to say the women are doing a lot better in terms of, at least for African American women, as far as the numbers. Not so with African American men, but collectively, African Americans are challenged to go into the profession because of financial reasons. And that's a form of racism as far as I'm concerned, because if you come from a family that does not have the economic means to support you, then, the idea of having a $250,000 debt from medical education. And I say that this is the only profession I know of, at least in this country, where you have to pay to practice. So $250,000 worth of debt, that's just for the medical school debt alone. That does not include other debts that you may have had from undergraduate, or if you went to graduate school, it does not include it. And that hampers a lot of individuals from going into this profession. And I'm gonna say this and shut up. I feel that when we're talking about reparations, there are people who I agree need to have financial reparations, because that's the only way they're going to be able to get up off their knees. But for other people who are interested in certain professions, particularly those professions that have such a strong impact on our communities, like healthcare, we need to have reparations for loan forgiveness, because in that way, that would take off those shackles that keep people from going into the profession. So thank you for letting me just divert with that, okay?
I really appreciate that. With regard to the cost of medical school, that doesn't include if someone wants to specialize.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is another huge cost that someone would have to incur. I'd like to just add that I was recently told by someone that at the University of Chicago, in their practice, that they have very, very, very few African Americans who are part of their specialty practices.
Mm. Well, that's interesting. Yes, I'm not surprised. But also, let me just correct something. The fellowships which people go into for specialties, you get paid, you start getting so-called paid when you become a resident, and also the fellowships, but it's never enough. You know what I'm saying? You still have that debt that's waiting for you to be paid off from, medical school. But what happens is that, yeah, oh, absolutely. So the other issue is that when you have all that debt, it's a pressure on you to say, well, wait a minute, if I've got $250,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 worth of debt, how in the world am I ever going to have a life? Buying a house or saving, for a family, so that has forced a lot of people to go into specialties, and has left us with the insufficient numbers of primary care practitioners that we need for the size of population. Okay. And so back to the thing about the specialties, are very few are Black. My question is why? Why? Okay. Is it their choice, or they are not being considered as good candidates for these specialty programs? Because these are like, for example, for many years, and there still are, I'm sure, these what we call pyramid programs in surgery. So that means that they may accept 10 people into a general surgery residency program, which is typically about 5 years. That's general surgery, not a subspecialty. And every year they end up kicking people out. So that means that whoever doesn't make it to the subsequent year, they have to somehow, figure out, what am I going to do? I'm going to go and do another residency and be competing with other people. I mean, it's really, it's a very daunting process that, that people find themselves in, especially when, like I said, when you have all that debt and you're trying to figure out, well, you think you're going to get into a profession that you make a lot of money in, but maybe not, so this is a challenge, And again, I'm wondering, for those students who are even considered specialty, how many people are mentoring them? Because, are they getting the opportunity to actually, shadow people and get that kind of support? Because it's really, really, important to have that kind of support, the mentoring at all levels.
Yes, I agree with you. Again, we're opening the floor for questions. But I do have a couple more questions for you, Dr. Shabazz.
And I see three raised hands, just to let you know.
Oh, do you? Okay. Okay.
And I can't tell you who they are, so you gotta let them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and thank us. Okay.
Yes. Well, please feel free to come on and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Brother Bashir, go first.
Okay. No, Clyde, you go first.
Brother Bashir, yeah.
Whoever
okay.
hand was raised first, go first.
Okay, well, I don't know that, but anytime Brother Bashir gives me an order, I follow it. Okay.
No.
I've been doing that since about 1972, 73. But,
thank you, but no thank you.
First of all, I really have to thank you, Dr. Shabazz, for bringing this to us. I come at it from a slightly different angle, just because of what my own journey in education has been. And I come at it from the angle, and you make me even more convinced that this is a good angle, of how do we help our students be smart about consuming this thing called education. Because it is a product, and there are smart ways to consume it, and there are not as informed ways to consume it. And the other thing I'll throw into my question is, how do we help our students know the real deal of the system that they're going into before they get there? Because they're going to be competing with people who've been given all kinds of insights to the system that we call higher education before they get there.
Right.
And the analogy that I make is that our kids go into college thinking it's a basketball game, and they're competing with people who know they're playing football. So they got 11 men on the field, and you got maybe 5.
Right.
And there's so many things that are simple things that we could give our students before they get there, just about the nature of the institution itself. Because, I just have to be honest with you. When you tell Black folks what the game really is, they usually become masters of it. And the way you keep them behind is you don't tell them what the game really, really is. Right. So 2 things I'll throw out is, even a lot of our students who come out of high school with great grades really have not been told how you actually study and what the strategies are you have to use to be successful in college, especially at some of the so-called elite institutions. They've never even been told what's the best way to read and consume information, and how to process information. And I didn't know it either. Allah just blessed me to be a part of a program to help Black students learn this at University of Michigan when I was there. And once we initiated the program, the white folks accused us of cheating because our Black students were beating the white kids in the difficult classes. So we must have been cheating. And the other thing is, I think we can learn from a consumption point of view is community colleges. What I pretty much spent all of my quote unquote higher ed career in community colleges. I see white kids in downtown Chicago paying very high tuition at some of the private schools, doing using the cafeteria approach and going over to the community college, Harold Washington College, and getting a really cheap chemistry course, a really cheap biology course, etc. And they transferred. So they end up paying a whole lot less money for their degree from this private school than Black students do, because they don't know how to consume it. And they don't also know what the tricks are in terms of what you do. And early exposure also is really important, because you tell us a game, we usually are going to win. So I don't know how you would incorporate that into some of the things that you're suggesting, but I'd just like to hear you respond to that.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I mean, actually at Southern Illinois University, they started something back in the 60s called MedPrep, okay? And this is a program still in existence today that actually it has a set of programs where they actually have people enrolled in there maybe a year or two in advance of them applying for medical school, dental school. And so they do an excellent job of preparing people how to survive medical school. You know, several of my classmates went through that program. But that's not everywhere that they have that, you know. So it's important to seek out programs like that in advance. A lot of times they'll have summer programs, you know, for youngsters who are interested in the sciences. You know, they usually get stipends and the like, you know. So taking advantage of things like that, but you have to know that it exists, and that's where our schools fall down just as badly, you know, in terms of the preparation and the quality of the education that they're getting as a foundation, as well as not having people who are aware of these programs, okay? And plugging the students into them. If it's not happening at your school, there are other places where that these students who have promise particularly or interest can actually go to. So that's one area I think is very important. The other thing is, back to the cost issue, a lot of times our students, medical students, don't know that there are ways in which their medical education can be paid for. You know, we know about FQHCs. There's a National Health Service Corps. That is a program that will provide you with a stipend in return for, once you complete your medical residency or a specialty program, you can practice at a health center that meets the criteria as a medically underserved or health profession shortage area and get your loans paid off. And we need to know that, because I mean, that's a barrier, just like we say in healthcare, that the cost of care is a barrier, okay? Not just, you know, where the health center is located or hospital is located, whatever. So we need to be aware of those kinds of things. What we are doing at Taleem is, and this is, let me give you a story about what happened recently. We were looking for a male practitioner, okay, because we knew that brothers felt more comfortable having a male practitioner, you know, seeing a male practitioner. And so we had already signed an agreement with Dominican University for them to place physician assistant students at our location. Well, when I reached out to the program director, I said, hey, I'm looking for some males. I'm either in your program. Ideally, I was looking for males who already completed the program. Could not find a one, okay? So these are programs that people are not aware of. And you know that Malcolm X has a physician assistant program.
Right.
These are good paying programs. People are starting, their starting salaries, you know, depending upon what city you're in, $65,000, $70,000, okay? But because we don't have that awareness about this, we find ourselves, when we get into the profession, that we end up with a lot of debt. If somebody had told us about these other options, that we would have been able to, you know, it would have taken a burden off of them, okay? Yeah. So yes, so there's the education piece of it, it's the monetary piece, it's the access. So it's about us making people aware of this. So that's part of the reason why we are a site for physician assistants. We're also going to be a site, inshallah, for medical assistants, and also because medical assistants, usually that's the entry point into medicine. And we want to use that as an opportunity to educate and support people. So that's part of our goal too, is not just provide the direct services, but also build up that workforce. But we can only do it in how would you say, in a stewardship manner, by also educating them as to, you know, the ins and outs. If you're interested in going into medicine, even as a medical assistant, there's a program we just found out about where they will pay for them to actually be at our site while they're getting their education. So these are things that we have responsibility to inform people about, not just say, hey, I'm a train, I'm gonna give you the skill, but then you don't know how you can actually make it into a profession, or that actually is a starting point to a higher profession. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's about education and along with the mentoring. And I hope I answered some of your questions.
Well, you did. We can talk further about it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So Dr. Shabazz, let me just ask you to, you can clear your screen so we're not sharing, because so that we can see.
Yeah, I would do that. I know somebody said that. I'm rude. Sorry about
that. And Brother Bashir Assad, I believe question, and we don't have a lot of time left, but we certainly want to get in as many questions as we can.
You didn't say that because I was long-winded.
Oh no.
That's the only way I can see. That was just a joke. Sister Constance, again, we want to thank you for coming on and giving your presentation. Very enlightening, and especially during the Women's Month, because I remember Imam Wardi Muhammad saying something that hit me right in the top of the head, and he said, women keep religion for real. And that was something that wasn't something I needed. But observations I wanted to make on your presentation. You address many of the great achievements of women in the area of medicine, and I think you're attributing that to Al-Islam, that came and liberated women and made it obligatory not only on men, but men and women to acquire knowledge and make a better world today. And Imam Wardi Muhammad gave us the responsibility to remake the world, and he said it's not a big job. So many of the things I think we're discussing today too is about remaking the world. The problems that especially African Americans are having in this society today to achieve in many of those areas. Those problems, because the Imam sensitized us to the solution to all of those problems are in the Quran. And he also pointed out that we're citizens here in the United States, and as citizens, we should be taking on the responsibility to make those needed changes. So I just wanted to make that observation too. One other observation the Imam made as far as Savior's Day, and said Savior's Day is a I'm paraphrasing this now, but work yet to be done. You know, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said one of his initiatives was to build a hospital, and I'm quite sure that hospital would have been also an educational institution. And I did work in the financial field with student loans, so I know what that situation is. And many of our students who get financial aid, they don't know what they're doing. They get the loans, and when it's time to be paid, they don't know what's happening. I used to give an analogy. It's like an ostrich. When an ostrich they say, I don't know if this is true, but he sticks his head in the sand. And this is just one of the many areas, as you mentioned out, that we need to address and find solutions to. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to let you know, I grew up in the same neighborhood where the hospital was planned to be built. I was literally 3 blocks away. And my mother, I'll be pleased with her, raise her up on the dead gender. She refused to sign a petition that was being circulated to block the hospital being built. I remember those things, look at full circle.
Yes. Oh my goodness. This has been amazing. We're down to our last few minutes. I just want to make a couple of comments. And again, we have time for maybe one more question or comment. But I just need to say that Dr. Constance Shabazz, that you really enlightened us today with talking about the knowledge of these powerful women, historical figures in al-Islam who were also in medicine. That is so inspirational for myself, but I also hope for some of our young female viewers, right? You talked about the marginalization of women. And we know that that's gone on like forever, but to really put those in perspective with regard to medicine and the value that women have. We are natural nurturers, right? We are natural caregivers. So I appreciate your comments about that. I love the fact that when you hear no, that means
yes. Let's go.
I am a personal witness to that. And working with Dr. Shabazz with the Islam Community Wellness Center. For Dr. Shabazz, I want you to know that you are not only a visionary, not only an innovator, but you are really a national treasure for our community. So I just need to say that to you. Okay. And Dr. Shabazz will be back. We have much more to come from Dr. Shabazz, and I'm looking forward to it. I see in comments from Dr. Aisha El-Amin, agreed, a national treasure, and she thanked we all thank you. And if there are no more questions, we look forward to seeing you next week for our 3rd installment of Women's History Month. Oh, I see another comment that the Cannon family, they're listening with their 10-year-old daughter. They thank you for informing and inspiring us this afternoon with your personal story and the story of other women, these historical women. So we appreciate that. So I look forward to seeing you all next week for our 3rd installment. We've got some very special things in store for you. All right. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you so much again.
Assalam. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Check the chat box for those of you, because there are some comments in here. Wonderful presentation. Thank you, Dr. Shabazz. We appreciate you. Yes, very informative. Thank you all. Assalamu alaikum.